Hi, this is Ed, and happy Halloween. It's October 31, 2022. Here in California, it's about 11:30 a.m. Sun is shining. It'll be about 75 degrees today. But our special guest is in New Jersey. LaShell Tinder, welcome.
Thank you, and happy Halloween to you. And it's a bit cloudy out here, but not bad. Not raining anyway. That's a good thing.
Yeah, so are you going out trick-or-treating tonight?
Definitely not.
No, I'm not either.
No more little kids. In fact, I don't even have candy in the house. I'm one of those boring people because I don't want the leftover candy. So lights are out tonight.
Right. So let's talk about you. And you're currently on assignment on a contract position, which means you're not a normal employee, but you're doing employee work. It's a gig work, right? It's almost like you're there, but you're not, right?
Yeah. So I'm a remote worker supporting Gilead Science for their global mobility team in a project capacity and as a contractor. And so I'm not dealing directly with assignees, transferees. I'm really working across the team to support implementations and operation efficiency projects, and really looking to see what are we doing and getting under the hood to say, why are we doing it that way? And how do we want to be doing it? And working with them to come together of what their future state looks like.
So do you put together the vendor team, or does somebody else do that?
Nope. So everything goes through an RFP. I did participate, and I'm looking at a future implementation where the RFP has already been conducted. So now I'll be working on scope work for that to really determine what are we looking for. And then kind of in preparation for that, doing some operation efficiency works. Like one of them was a keep, stop, start project of looking to see what are we doing and why are we doing it and how do we do it. And that really makes you think through, how do you want to work with your suppliers?
Are you managing the performance?
No, I do support from the perspective of, I guess, accountabilities. So as it comes to things that I'm working on, if they're doing something that I work through with them, what does that look like from a change perspective or accountabilities? But I'm not managing the team, but I guess maybe influencing without authority would be the best way to say it.
So who do they report to? How do they know if they're performing well?
Yeah, so our head of global mobility manages the team, and I report into her.
Oh, I get it. Okay. So she's in-house.
Oh, yeah, she's in-house. So we have 3 full-time employees, and then there's some contract employees that are supporting work with the assignees, and some of them have been contracted for several years.
So from a structural point of view, I don't mean anything negative by this, but what does she do if she has you?
Oh, she has a lot. So she's truly in charge of
the
that
stakeholders, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So she's truly in charge of that strategic vision, working with the stakeholders. I support her in her mission and her strategy. So it's really about, how does she want the operation to look? And I support that vision.
So that's a pretty good corporate approach to it, because because she's outsourcing the thing to you, but still retains the executive power and responsibility.
Yeah, it really is like having that right hand. It's if you think of kind of the kind of right hand person that just kind of helps drive some of these things, I get to sit in that role along with the 2 full-time employees who are the right hand people to manage the employee pieces. So in a program, that's a fairly large size program globally, it works well so that she can really get into some strategy.
So I don't mean to pry. I'm just trying to relate this to our audience, which is global. And a lot of people who will see this thing. So from that point of view, the boss, the head of global mobility, is freed up to relate more strategically across stakeholders, therefore combining the mobility function with the talent search and the talent development. Right.
That's the goal. She has an open role right now, so it's not as freed up as she'd like. So anybody looking to apply, get in there and look at Gilead Science. They are definitely recruiting for that head of global mobility role for, I'm not head of global, but global mobility manager for the Americas. So now she needs that role filled, but yes, it's ideally designed so that she can really be strategic looking across talent. What are we doing there? How are we doing it? What are some of the critical challenges in different countries? So a very strategic type of focus.
So it's delineated. They figured out how to delineate
Regionally.
what you're doing
Mhm.
compared to her filling slots with direct line management or.
Yeah, so the line managers are assignee focused. So they work on the employee matters. And then I'm very specifically related to projects.
I see. Let's just talk for a second before we get to you about that. Are the line managers the like Americas or Europe or Latin America or whatever? Do they help? Do they counsel the transferees? Are they helping them be a better transferee? You know,
Yeah,
and is there a feedback, an ROI measurement that way?
I think ROI is a huge question within mobility because I'm not sure that ROI is difficult when you put it in mobility. And there's those of us in the industry that probably think that it's a misnomer to even think of ROI because it's really hard to get something concrete on how do you measure that ROI. But in terms of their value, definitely there's the value. So what they're doing is their focus is connecting with recruiters. So they're I guess the kind of center of that multi-pronged approach of working with the business, working with recruiters, working with the employee, working with HR business partners, and seeing how are we managing the entire process end to end, and then the work with the suppliers. So when you think about your supplier partners and how are those services getting delivered, so they are structurally really that kind of glue that holds the whole process together, and making sure that there's the right level of accountabilities from the suppliers, that there's the right level of accountabilities from the HR teams in transferring, and how does that all flow. And then really counseling the employee, making sure that one, they know what to expect, but two, helping them along the way, because it's hard to retain all of that, and kind of thinking through, okay, next steps. If it is, even if it is a perm transfers, we know permanent is only permanent for so long. So, even if it's perm transfer, then still, what is your next step and what does that look like, and be ready for that. So there's a lot of counseling that goes involved in.
Does the counseling involve next position?
It depends on kind of what it is, and it's not going to take place early on. And this is where we do that reality check of talent, that, ideally in that perfect scenario, we would be having the talent discussion before they ever go on assignment. What's your next step after this one? I don't think that most organizations are doing it to that level. And I think that there may be a few out there, but that would be the ideal scenario, because then you're approaching, okay, you're headed out on this perm transfer, but what's your next perm transfer look like? What is that going to look like for you? What is it going to look like for the family? What are the things you want to take from a knowledge learning perspective? And how will this one kind of funnel into those career progressions that you want to go to? So whether it's a formal conversation with mobility or formal conversation with HR, I don't know that it's always happening to the degree that would be helpful.
So the ROI question is amorphous, sort of gray, not black and white, because it's all personal.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the expectations of that person by the line manager? So the measurement, therefore, comes from what the daily contact with the transferees, or at least monthly contact, seeing, okay, there's a job to do, how they doing on the job. And then that transferee has built up skills, achieving that, first of all, being in a strange location, and then making things work and managing the family, if there is one, as well as the work. And so that becomes an asset of the company.
Sure.
And so they want to retain that and then move that person into some other role. So would they also ask that transferee that's now gathered all this experience, good and bad, to be a mentor to the person following behind?
Yeah, I mean, that's the perfect world. And I think that a lot of organizations are getting better at that. That's something that I did hear, like when I was attending the ERC recently, there was a lot of conversation around those types of programs being implemented where there was a buddy system or a mentor system set up for when people are arriving, and really using that network to continue that kind of growth process and making sure that people are thinking about next steps and what does this look like if I want to be kind of on that global track, or how can I continue my employee like value proposition itself as an individual, and what am I gaining and what am I giving back to the organization. I think where we have our biggest challenge in all of that, and I think that this is not just related to mobility, it's how do you retain those employees? Because we've talked about the Great Resignation and all of that. So how do you retain the employees, whether it's within mobility program or outside it? And I think it comes back down to, what are you offering as that EVP? What is your employee value proposition? How are you encouraging them that through staying in the organization, we are going to truly provide you with a career track like none other? How does mobility tie to that? So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. Who's going to get there first? Who knows? But I think that, through collaborations, through corporate benchmarking, through conversations, we're getting different ideas from other people out there that are doing something different than we're doing. So how do you put that into it?
So let's talk again about the talent cycle. And would you be called on to be a consultant to the recruiter? Is that an answer? No.
Sorry about that. So, this is the advantage of working from home and the disadvantage. You always get the dogs in the background. So I, in my present position, would not be called on. Have I been called on? Absolutely. So when in that kind of head of role or in a manager role where you're working directly with the assignee population, absolutely. I mean, you should be called on. And if you're not being called on, there's a disconnect in that communication
Right.
of your value to the organization.
Right.
So,
and that's been proven.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So Gilead or Gilead?
Gilead?
Yeah. Is that research, bio?
Yeah, it's a science. Gilead Science. It's a pharma company.
Uh-huh. Okay. So it's global.
Yes, very much.
Now, with that in mind, global talent, global business talent, that's a theme of what we're doing on Global TV Talk Show these days, asking people around the world, how are they managing global business talent, not just talent, global business talent. So, and a lot of it is remote. So just like you are in your job, but let's just say that Gilead, Gilead or Gilead?
Gilead.
Yeah. Oh, Gilead. Okay.
Hard G.
It's from Jersey, New Jersey?
No, they're based out of California.
Oh, I didn't even know. I'm here. Where are they? Must be up north.
They're in Foster City.
Yeah. Okay. A suburb of San Francisco. So they're going to have people in Taiwan or in Vietnam or Singapore.
They are located, I believe, in 35 countries, but I may be wrong. I know that we have assignees in 35 countries, so they may have a lot more operations. I need to answer that question for you later, I guess, but I'm focused more on the mobility. So I'm sure we're probably in more than that, but we've got some people within the mobility space in 35.
So one of the reasons I'm asking about this, there's two reasons. First of all, I'm enlarging our audience and expanding into Asia Pac. I'm doing a series of these conversations with people across the region. And it's a huge region. My God, it's so big. So I'm just an infant in that world. But we've already done 4 or 5 shows. That's good. Do a lot more. Is the company, and this is just unofficial, but is the company thinking about employing talent remotely? Like, for instance, I'm in San Diego, California, and they've got a job opening of some kind in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Would they consider, if I was qualified to employ me, I'd be working remotely from San Diego, but for that company in Malaysia?
Yeah, so I mean, companies are always looking in terms of what is the impact if we're hiring somebody remotely, and what does that mean from a tax and immigration perspective?
Hmm.
Because even if you're not sitting in country to do any of the work, then you need to be able to have the qualifications to perform that work for that entity. So there is a Gilead Flex program that does allow some remote work. I don't have the details on it specifically, but it does allow, some remote work based on very specific criteria. And that would be the same with any organization, that they're going to have to establish how does that remote work within the structure of the organization, as well as how does it align with their talent mission and strategy.
I'm a little disconnected with who's being transferred these days because of the pandemic and, everything connected. But is spouse assistance still popular?
Yeah, it is. And I think that, one of the things that we're seeing are
Spouse partner assistance.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely it's something that's being provided, whether it's being provided as a specific benefit where you get the normal services through one of the providers and it's a direct pay through the client company, or if it's an allowance and they have maybe a retail product and some guidance on using that retail product through the spouse provider for that general family allowance. I think the DE&I initiatives are really moving more companies away from just saying, okay, let's do the spouse partner career transition assistance, and let's really open it up more to a family allowance. And here's some of the offerings you may want to consider. And in that then is a retail package that they can take from the spouse partner career transition company.
It's fascinating stuff. So with this new emphasis or infiltration of ESG, the environment, and the impact of a relocation on the environment, when you think of it, you're shipping stuff, you're getting on a plane, and all this stuff. They never thought about that. Yet some companies are being graded on how they are handling that. So there's a conflict going on, that's for sure. I would think it's a growing conflict.
Yeah, it was interesting at the conference to listen to the focus on both DE&I and ESG and where those two kind of merge together. Because so you think about sustainability, then there was also the conversation in terms of governance and environment, and then DE&I is somehow getting merged into it. So we've got this alphabet soup of
Right.
really focusing on how do we, as an industry, within mobility, support our company objectives to lower numbers from SEG, how can we help in that environmental and sustainability focus? And there are some ways. And I think you're going to see some shifts in policy to allow more flexibility, where maybe you have, early development career people that they don't have the best of furniture, or they really don't care about it. And they're saying, okay, I'll get rid of mine, give me an allowance, I'll pick it up in the new place. And then they're picking up maybe secondhand furniture. So we're repurposing furniture. That's adding to the sustainability. So there's a lot of conversation around how these are going to start playing out and what that's going to look like. And I think it ties to the flexibility for the employee, which is another thing we're all aiming for, because that's what they're demanding.
So finally, for this brief conversation, I invite you to come back on the show sometime. But younger people, recruiting people into the industry of global mobility. We all know that's not easy to do, but it just tends to happen. So what's the training program? It's all just an intern apprenticeship kind of a thing, just to be exposed to the processes and, okay, try your hand on how you handle this situation. And then hopefully there's success, and then they're giving a bigger job, and then they move on.
Well, I think that industry of global mobility is a very well-kept secret, unfortunately. And when people hear mobility, they often think that it's IT related, because we think of the infrastructure of super cities and mobility of let's say, connectivity. So, this is where we do have some specific ways of learning, like through, there's different peer groups that we can belong to. There's different conferences, regional places, listening to your broadcasts, because you bring in a lot of us to help in those learnings. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to learn, but there's nothing that's really structured. And this is honestly a little plug for myself. Future state for me, I'm actually looking at what can I do in retirement, because I love learning and development. I'm passionate about learning and development. So I think that this is where those of us in the field, we have that opportunity to mentor, to coach, but also let's see, how can we be part of that learning strategy to bring more people into the industry, not by falling into it on accident, but purposefully entering the industry.
Being intentional. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it all comes from, I mean, how do you advertise this kind of a job? It's who you know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the way that most people have just fallen into this. So, it's hopefully we can spread the word a little bit better and maybe be, again, finding ways to be more intentional in recruitment. There are some good recruiting agencies out there that they're obviously mining, resumes that are out and things. So, maybe it will be an industry that in 20 years time, it will be as intentional as some other areas of HR.
Interesting, isn't it? Thank you, LaShell Tinder, for being on Global TV Talk Show.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be with you.
Ciao.
Ciao.